Okay. Hey, David, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Doing fine,
Thanks so
thank you.
much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been kind of excited to have you on. I like celebrity chefs. I love talking about food.
Well, you know why I'm here hawking my new book. You know, the new cookbook, which is called "Tomato Grows in Brooklyn," and it's more than a cookbook. I write a little bit about my life, how I ended up where I am, and it's really going back. I'm taking you, the reader, back to Brooklyn. And I grew up in the 60s and 70s and early 80s in Brooklyn, where it was like the wild, wild west. So I give you a little taste for that. But at the same time, I give you some really nice recipes that my grandmother and all the other Italians in the neighborhood would cook. And, I say in the book, which is really true, this is not Italian cooking. It's Italian American cooking. And I say we're the 21st region of Italy. We don't speak like that. We don't speak the same language. We have our own dialect, and we certainly have our own food. So, open up the pages of that new cookbook, and you'll get a flair for what it's really all about.
Well, I know it is different because I've been to Italy, and the food you get in Italy is much different than the food you're going to get in an Italian restaurant in New York or in Boston.
Yeah. Well, you know what happened in Brooklyn? And my mother's Neapolitan, and my father's Sicilian. My father came over when he was 14. So we lived in one house. Next door to us was people from Calabria. The next door from that was people from Basilicata. And what happened is, over the decades, people passed recipes around that were unique to their region. And over the decades, this passing around and sharing of great cooking melted together. And that's really where the basis, and this is not restaurant cooking. This is real, the home style of what my grandmother did and all the grandmothers and mothers in the neighborhood did in Brooklyn. And it's, you know, growing up in Brooklyn, on a Sunday morning, I could open up the window. Well, let me tell you this. We had no air conditioning back then. It was hot. In July and August, forget about it. It was hot. So you open up the windows on Sunday morning, and the first thing you smell is my grandmother had a pot as big as Prospect Park's lake, and she had the tomato sauce cooking for hours and hours, even before I woke up, so I can smell the tomato sauce. And she'd have the bread in the oven, and you hear she had playing an old time Italian singer named Calabuti every Sunday. But the uniqueness is, with the windows open, the next door neighbor had their own rendition, and the following neighbor, their own rendition. So on Sunday morning, it was a concert of music, great food, and a lot of love. There was a lot of love in those. We lived around the kitchen table, and tremendous. And that's what I try to reflect within the book.
So when you're making the sauce, is it true what they did in Goodfellas and Paulie used the razor blade on the garlic?
Yeah, I mean, my grandma didn't use a razor blade. She didn't need it. I mean, with her knife, she could cut as thin as a razor blade. But you know, it's what's really funny about it. Everybody used the same ingredients: garlic, olive oil. If you're doing the ragu on Sunday, which we didn't call sauce, we call gravy, with the meatballs and the pork spare ribs and the sausage and everything. Um, then you put a little garlic in the sauce too. If you're not putting meat in it, you don't put garlic, onion. It's just olive oil and garlic. But on the Sunday gravy, that olive oil, fruity, flavorful olive oil, fragrant garlic, onion, and then a good generous pinch of a pepperoncini, which is the crushed red hot pepper. And to that, see, we used to grow the tomatoes in the backyard, as many people in Brooklyn did. So you go down to the cellar, you get the jar of what we call an Italian passata, which is tomatoes, just ripe tomatoes cooked down and jarred. Add that, and then you add your meat, your meatballs, everything, and you simmer that for 4 or 5 hours. Man, forget about it. That's Brooklyn. That's the Italian American Brooklyn. That's what it brings tears to your eyes when you smell that cooking. I don't care who you are. Very hard to pass up a dish of rigatoni with that sauce. Oh, forget about it.
So when did you decide that you were going to be a chef for a living?
Well, it kind of saved me. I was a troubled kid, you know. I was orphaned when I was 5. Luckily, my grandmother took me in. I was a troubled kid. By the time I was 10, I was arrested 6 times. And at some one point, I decided, you know what? If I stay in the street, I'm going to end up locked up for the rest of my life, or I'm going to end up dead. So I looked at the love and the passion my grandmother had for cooking. And at that time, now we're talking the early 70s, Italian restaurants were just red sauce places. I wanted to go into restaurant, but I wanted to be us in Brooklyn, whether we're qualified or not, we want the best, we become the best. We got visions of grandeur. So in those days, like I said, Italian restaurants, they were subpar, just red sauce places. So I went and got used copies of Gourmet magazine. And the reviewer in Gourmet was a guy named Jay Jacobs. And Jay Jacobs said to me, French is where you go. And the best French restaurants in those days there were 2. Was Lutèce and Le Caravelle, both in Manhattan. Lutèce, you could not get in to work because no one ever left there. There was never a position open. Guys stayed there forever. So I said, I'll go to Le Caravelle. I went 12 times. 12 times before I could say, chef. He said no. They were all French in the kitchen. The chef said he was a legendary chef named Roger Feziguet. And the 13 is unlucky for most people. On the 13th time, I showed up at the door of the Caravelle, and they all knew me by then. I was a pest. So, unfortunately, Feziguet had a slight heart attack 2-3 days before, and the sous chef is on the pass. And I walk in now, everybody's got to move up a notch because the sous chef now takes over as the chef. At the end of the service, I went over to him. I said, Chef, he says, you start on Monday. Oh, my God. Now, Grant, you got to remember something. I never worked in a restaurant. You know, I BS'd my way in everywhere. I mean, that's just the way we did things. I run home. I go to B. Dalton bookstore. I buy every French cookbook I could find. Craig Claiborne, Julia Childs. I memorized words like dishes, which these restaurants never cooked these kind of dishes. So I show up on Monday morning, and let me tell you something. Talk about baptism by fire. Oh, my God. The kitchen was hot. There were 42 in the brigade, and it was something out of a movie. Everybody in white with the white toques on their hat, on their head. And Moisan was the sous chef, now the chef, screaming and yelling, but every 42 guys never opened their mouth. And for 7 months, I got abused. But you know what? From the streets of Brooklyn, you couldn't deter me. So after 7, I lasted 7 months. And one night, going home to Brooklyn after a service after 7 months, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm going through the Red Hook section of Brooklyn. Guy gets on the train, just me and him, and he ends up, we get in a fight. He stabs me, and it was bad scene. And I actually got locked up for that. And when I got out on bail, guys that I knew were going to fix it for me said, look, you got to lie low for a while. I had been in jail for a week because of this. I thought I lost my job at the Caravelle. It broke my heart. I went back and physically saw the emotion in my eyes. I had tears in my eyes. And he says, don't worry about it. You still have your job. So I had to go disappear for a while. So I said to him the next day, because I wanted you to know, for 7 months I heard I was no good and you couldn't speak English. So I went to Berlitz to get a crash course on French. And I knew all the bad words in 7 months. So the next day I went to Feziguet and I said, you always said I was no good because I didn't work in France and I'm not French. Well, I can't make myself French. How about you send me to France? He's okay. I'll let you know later. The next day he says to me, on Monday, you have to be in Nice. You're going to work at the Hotel Negresco. But when you're done, you have to come back to me. I understand. And that Monday, the adventure started. And I worked 14 months under a very famous, at that time, the chef was named the best young chef in France by a magazine called the Gomio. And his name was Jacques Maxim. Was a terror. Guy was about 5'5". He had the Napoleon complex. And I thought Caravelle was tough. This was 10 times worse. But it opened my eyes to what cuisine really could be. And so right before I left, I went to work a couple of the restaurants, what they call stagiaire, where you stay for a short period of time. I went to Lyon with Paul Bocuse, who at that time was the most famous chef in the world. And from there, I spent a few weeks in the foot of the Pyrenees Mountains at a place called Eugénie-les-Bains with a chef named Michel Girard, who to me, and to most people, was the greatest chef of the 20th century. And I, at the end of that time with Girard, I knew how to spell the word magic. Because that man was magic. And from there, I went back to the Caravelle. And just not that long after, when I was 25 years old, I started in the kitchen when I was before I turned 18, I was 17. When I was 25, they made me the executive chef of the Caravelle. I got great reviews. And from there, I was hired by Pierre Cardin, the clothing designer. I went to work for him at Maxim's in New York, where I got 3 stars.
Wow.
I mean, and the world was opened up to me. And then I started owning my own restaurants. And then what happened was the famous winemaker, Robert Mondavi, had decided he was going to try to search out the 13 best young chefs in America. And he was going to, each of the 13, he was going to put them on TV. And he picked me as one of the 13. That's how I ended up on PBS. And from there, I started my own PBS show called Little Italy, which was it was fun. I had a cookbook with it. And then I get a call. I started doing, I don't know if you remember, on Food Network, there was a show called Cooking Live. It was a 1-hour live show where the chef, Sarah Moulton, would take calls and answer questions and cook. So she has this 1-hour show. And I start to fill in from her. And a couple of weeks later, and I was over the top on TV. Forget it, I was a nut. And so a couple of weeks later, I got called into the office of the head of programming. Her name was Eileen Oputut at Food Network. And Food Network at that time was on fire. And she said to me, I thought she was going to tell me, I got a little crazy with callers on the phone. I thought she was going to tell me, oh, you don't ever come back here again. And she says to me, you want your own show on Food Network? I looked around. I said, what is this, a gig? Are you kidding me or what? No. And from there, I got my own show called Ruggerio to Go, and sky the limit. And then, over a stupid crime with credit cards, overnight, right before that, I had 5 restaurants. I was building the 6th one. I had 650 employees. I mean, and the stupid crime on an overnight came everything crashing down. But there was a happy ending to it. I started opening different kind of restaurants. I opened sushi restaurants, and I opened a New York style Jewish deli. But I was so entrenched with French, but my heart was in the home style Italian cooking, because anybody that really knows Italian cooking knows the best cooking comes from the home. But that's the way which is predominantly Southern Italian cooking. It's cooking from the heart. It's cooking with the seasons. It's, I say the basis of our cooking is from the olive and the vine. The olive and the vine is where we create. That's the basis. That's the base from where we create our cooking. And so I saw the last 2-3 years with all the craziness going on and stuff, and Columbus, what are we going to take Columbus' statue out and this and that? I got to defend my own people. So in this cookbook, I do talk about not only my how I got to where I am, but also about the Italian people, how we struggled to get to where we are and where we are today. And then I give you these recipes, and I think it's a good read. I think people will enjoy it. I think I'm entertaining a little bit in the book.
Well, David, that was a tremendous story, and that was just perfectly timed for the end of this interview. So we do have to wrap it up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. My website is David Ruggerio, RUGGERIO.com. DavidRuggerio.com. And you get all the recipes, you get giveaways, you get all kinds of stuff. They're loaded with stuff. So visit me. And I'm also got a YouTube channel I just started to put up. You see all the old Food Network stuff, PBS, and I'm coming up with new videos, which I'm filming every week.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.